Right, you guys are good to go.
Thank you. Well, it is 6:01 p.m. and we are calling to order this regular meeting of the Beaches, Parks and Recreation Commission for this Tuesday, January 12th, 2021. We begin the meeting as we always do with the Pledge of Allegiance, led this evening by John Doherty.
Stand. Place your hand over your heart and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Miley, can we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Aaron?
Here.
Commissioner Dory?
Here.
Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Wolfhard?
Here.
Chair Pro Tem Bandrick?
Here.
Chair Striger?
Here. Okay, item number 1 on the agenda, special presentation. Samantha, do we have any?
None this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. Item number 2 on the agenda is approval of the minutes. We've had 2 meetings in December. The December 8th meeting, which was just the commission, and then December 17th was a joint meeting, our commission and the safety committee meeting. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to review the minutes from both of those. So with regard to the December 8th, 2020 minutes for the BCO regular meeting, the floor is open for a motion to approve or to modify as needed. Anyone wish to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, Charlie makes a motion to approve. Is there a second? I see John
Second.
giving it a second. Is there any discussion on that motion? Okay, so in order to have an accurate head count for votes, as we've done in the past, we're going to raise our hand and try to see in the monitor that your hand is visible. So all in favor of the motion, indicate by raising your hand up. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 6, Miley. Okay, that matter passes. And then the December 17th, 2020 minutes for the joint meeting. And the floor is open for any motion to approve or to modify as needed. We have a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Charlie has made a motion to approve. Is there a second? Looks like Bernie has seconded that. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, please indicate your affirmance by raising your hand. See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Miley? Yeah, that matter passes as well. Item 3 on the agenda, current community activities and events. Samantha, you have a report for us?
I have no report this evening.
Okay. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 4A, use of electric bikes on the beach trail, inland trails, and parks. This is a continuing matter we've had in our 2 meetings on. And Samantha, I guess we'll begin with your report. Then we'll go to public comment, which I understand to be lengthy this evening. Samantha, you
That's
need to begin?
correct.
Steve,
Yes, thank you,
Steve,
Chair
I'm having a
Striger.
little trouble hearing you. Sorry, I'm just interrupt real quick. You're
Is anybody
cutting in and
else?
out, Steve.
Is anybody else having trouble hearing me?
That's better.
Huh. Okay. Let me connection or looks solid. I don't if I ended up fading out and I have a connection issue, then obviously we'll defer to John Vandrick or Samantha to take over, but hopefully I should be solid here. Zoom has been giving me a few issues of late. But in any event, Samantha, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Striger. Good evening, Commissioners. Samantha Wiley, Recreation Manager. Before you this evening is a continuation of an item for the consideration of the use of electric bicycles on the beach trail, the beach, citywide trails, and parks. As the Commission's quite familiar with this topic, I won't belabor it too much. I believe the details are in the staff report related to where we've been and where we stand today. On a very high level overview, I think that the goal this evening is to provide a recommendation to the City Council moving forward. We've met with the Public Safety Committee as well, gained their feedback back in December. The recap of that discussion is included in this evening's agenda on the staff report. And I think some of the major takeaways is that, and what we've seen in the themes of these conversations, is that all these entities should be considered somewhat separately. Certainly our inland trails get different usage than the beach trail versus the parks. And to some extent, Sea Summit Trail also has a much different layout and landscape, if you will, as well. So I'm happy to take any questions if there are any. But again, I think the goal tonight is to have the commission make a final recommendation to move forward to the city council for final approval.
Great, thank you. Does anybody have any specific questions before we get to the reading of the public comments? Okay, Miley, the floor is yours.
Right, the first comment is from Mike Innes. Thank you for considering the matter of e-bikes on the beach trail and other areas around town. I'm writing to ask that our beach trail remain open to e-bikes under the same rules and speed limits that currently exist for human-powered bicycles. The trail should be enjoyed by all, no matter an individual choice to walk, run, bike, scoot, jog, or waddle. We already have rules in place for the trail. Let's allow fair access and use of the trail for all who can follow the existing rules. I am on the trail almost every day, and of the thousands of times I have enjoyed the trail, I cannot recall a negative experience with an e-biker. Thank you for your consideration in this matter, Mike.
Next comment is from JL. As a resident that walks the trails from Sea Summit to Calafia 7 days a week, I am against the ban of e-bikes on the trails. I've yet to see a biker of any form on the Sea Summit trails. With all of the staircases, it makes it unrealistic that a heavy e-bike would be carried up and down them. Regarding the beach trail, I see two segments of people riding bikes on the trail, older and younger kids going surfing. Generally, the younger kids are more considerate than the older folks with regards to speed and waiting to pass. While I do not own an e-bike myself, I see the importance of the e-bikes. They allow kids to get to surf locations easier. I would much rather see e-bikes on the beach trails than to see kids sitting at home playing video games. Keep San Clemente the outdoor town that it's always been. Post more speed limit signs and actually send someone down to enforce it. Thank you.
Right, the next is from Kelly Ferry. E-bikes should be considered a moving vehicle because of their speed. I would make it mandatory to have anyone under 18 to take a driver's course to own and operate one, just like a driver's license. The users don't have any etiquette and ride them recklessly everywhere in San Clemente. Trails, pathways, and sidewalks were designed for pedestrians to provide safety from vehicles. Put e-bikes on the street where they belong, and I believe the riders would be more responsible of their usage.
This comment is from Susan Brewer of San Clemente. Dear City Council, an e-bike or electric bike is a motorized vehicle and cannot be allowed on the beach trail, city trails, or parks. These areas are often full of pedestrians, and in many places, the trails are too narrow to safely allow passage of pedestrian and bike. Unfortunately, I have experienced several near misses on the beach trail with bikes. The rules of biking safely and adhering to the speed limit are being ignored. Beach trail bicyclists seem unaware of the maximum speed limit of 10 miles per hour. Since there is no enforcement, e-bikes only add to this dangerous situation. Our safety is the first priority on our trails and parks. Keep e-bikes out of our trails and parks. Sincerely, Susan Brewer, San Clemente resident.
Next is from Lori Jones. Please, please do not allow e-bikes on the beach trail. It is far too narrow for these fast-moving bikes. To everyone who has been buzzed by one, had to jump out of the way, or was just plain scared, it ruins the beach trail walk. The intention of the trail was never for these motorcycles. The bike lanes on the street is where they belong. When someone gets severely injured, will the city be liable?
The next one is from Ann Worthington of San Clemente. It is time for the city to be proactive and regulate the use of all types of bicycles before a fatal or near fatal accident occurs. I support the prohibition of all bicycles on the beach trail and Sea Summit trails in San Clemente. These trails were constructed for pedestrians, not bicycles. At a minimum, bicycles should be prohibited these trails from Memorial through Labor Day, as well as on Saturdays and Sundays throughout the year. If bicycles are permitted on the trail, they should be required to yield to pedestrians. Now that e-bikes have become more common than standard bicycles, they propose a distinct hazard during their use because of their speed. I believe the city should also provide a public service announcement to all e-bike riders that helmets are required on motorized vehicles and the rules of the road apply to all cyclists. That means stopping at all stop signs and staying in the proper lane.
Next is from Vincent Macias. On Sunday, January 10th, I went for my normal Sunday run on the bike path. As I was just north of the pier by the railroad crossing, a young girl on an electric bike just flew by me. Had she made contact with anyone on the trail, it would have caused a serious injury. The thought that some of these irresponsible kids on these electric bikes have no regard for public safety is mind-boggling to me. As a frequent runner on the trail 3 to 4 times a week, I know it's just a matter of time before I witness or am involved in a collision with one of these bikes. As a runner for over 40 years, I have developed a defensive approach when I run. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder when I pass walkers, knowing that I could be struck from behind due to veering over to pass. Developing this technique, I have avoided multiple close calls with these electric bikes. I'm confident the commission will do the right thing and ban these bikes from our beach trail. I don't believe the trail was meant to be used in this unsafe and dangerous manner. I know there are responsible riders of these electric bikes as I have seen them, but I have also noticed an unfortunate increase in young, irresponsible riders, which forced me to voice my valid concern.
Our next comment is from Heather Goulet of San Clemente. Thank you for listening to residents' concerns. I believe e-bikes should not be permitted on the trail. Since COVID-19 arrived, e-bike usage has skyrocketed. COVID will go away. E-bikes are here to stay. Trail use in non-summer months has not decreased. Because of their size, speed, and weight, e-bikes should be treated as motorized vehicles. Could golf carts be the next trendy form of transport allowed on the trail? San Clemente has dedicated bicycle lanes on surface streets, which are more appropriate to e-bike size, speed, and weight. San Clemente cannot afford dedicated enforcement. It's impossible to enforce walking bicycles on the trail. Public attempts to do so will result in nasty interactions. Riding bikes on the Mariposa Bridge is especially dangerous. Additional signage along the trail will be ugly. Our trail is for enjoyment, exercise, relaxation. It is not a freeway. Thank you for your consideration.
The next is from Lynn Hopper. I have seen a growing concern with the use of electric bikes in the area. I live on the south end of San Clemente and frequent Lost Swims Beach often and walk on the trail. I've seen dangerous situations that warrant a consideration of how an electric bike is used. What are they? Today they can act as a pedestrian, a car, a bike, and sometimes they make up their own rules for what they want to do. They speed on the beach trail, they fly down the beaches on the sand. Often they have an attitude that goes along with them. I have seen it escalate and know for a fact that non-licensed drivers are given electric bikes and free rein to go and do what they like. There's no supervision, nor are there rules for them to follow. It is a dangerous predicament, and there needs to be something done to make areas safe. Please look at keeping them off the beaches for sure, and at least monitoring them or getting them off the beach or get them off the beach trail. They don't pedal, they can go up and use the roads. Just walked the beach trail this last Sunday. It was super crowded. There's no way to socially distance, and a biker actually clipped me as he said, passing on your left, as I was trying to walk around people standing on my right. The bridge is definitely an issue with space as well. Bikes are beginning to get parked all over the beaches and now on sidewalks so they can find something to lock to. I know those rental scooters have been banned in San Diego for the reason that they are left in awkward places. There are always issues that come with new things and crowds. So it is just a matter of creating some policies or a yield to policy to keep our community running smoothly. Riding on the beach, however, seems crazy to me. That is our sanctuary. Thanks for considering some rules to follow so things don't get more out of hand. We all need to live in one place safely and sanely.
Our next comment is from Anonymous. Good evening, and thank you for your time and consideration of the perceived issue of e-bikes on the trails in San Clemente. I can understand the frustration some people feel when an e-bike, stroller, surfboard, paddleboard, dog poop, or any other item disrupts or interferes with their jog, walk, or scenic time on the trails or streets of San Clemente. I can also appreciate the potential risk those riding on e-bikes, golf carts, skateboards, etc. take when they are on the roads and don't necessarily follow safety protocols. While I can appreciate the frustration and temporary scare that can occur, I do not believe everyone in the city of San Clemente should have their rights restricted due to the actions of a few people being inconsiderate. This issue is one that can be solved through the consideration of others. And when that does occur, a conversation to resolution can occur between the offender and offended. This is not an issue so extreme that it requires government action or policy to restrict everyone's use of the trail. The select few individuals who ride too fast on the trail, walk too casually with large boards, or don't pick up after their pets should not impact the rights of those who are considerate of others. Not everyone who rides an e-bike is doing so recklessly or without thought of their surroundings. For example, my mom has RA, a degenerative disease that attacks and destroys her joints. She uses an e-bike to stay active, but in the event one of her joints goes out and she is in serious pain, she uses the e-bike functionality to get home. This can happen at any time without warning due to her medical condition. By passing this ordinance to restrict the use of e-bikes on the trail, you are forcing her to either walk home at a time when she physically cannot, use a car to further pollution without a guaranteed place to park, or subjecting her to ride only on the street with large vehicles where she could get hurt. This is only a single example of how this ordinance could impact the rights and usage of people with disabilities in a detrimentally harmful way. Surfers sometimes get in the way of a jog. Dog poop sometimes gets left on the trail. Teenagers occasionally go too fast with their e-bikes, but for the majority, people in this town care about one another. They don't need a city ordinance to restrict the liberties of all people because a few have forgotten their manners. My parents use their e-bikes to ride from here to Dana Point for breakfast or to go play pickleball at San Gornio Park. I personally use an e-bike without a motor on the trail to get from my house in the southwest to their house in the north without having to ride on the street. The trail is a place to enjoy public views of the ocean, access the beach, and get positive outdoor exercise. It would be detrimental to people with degenerative diseases to restrict the way they can access the public views and trails, harmful to the environment with the increased use of cars or trucks, limit public parking access due to the increased population not having their ability to ride their bikes with their boards or recreation equipment from their homes, and creates an additional burden on the beach trail to monitor when our city doesn't have the manpower to actually regulate the issue.
And that's 3 minutes. The next is Martin Goggins. Hello, commissioners. I sent my comments to you at the last meeting, but chose not to have them read. I watched the last meeting and can understand the concerns. As an avid bicycle rider, mountain bikes and e-bikes, I would oppose prohibiting any bicycles from the beach trail. In my opinion, the beach trail should be multi-use. As the police officer at the last meeting stated, there have been no reports of incidents. I understand that this does not mean that there's not a safety issue, but would like to see if we can try somehow to educate people using the trail. There seems to be some misconceptions even by the commission on the different classes of e-bike. Just because a bike has a fat tire does not mean that it is a class 3 e-bike. Can we post a more clear set of rules for using bikes on the trail? If all users were clear on the rules, it may solve some of the frustration. Is it possible to have a volunteer patrol in the areas where there are problems? Bottom line is, if users would just be courteous to one another, this would not be an issue. I think there are some people that just don't like bikes, even though they have never had an issue. Please try to exhaust all solutions before banning bicycles. Thank you for your consideration.
Our next comment is from Pete Van Nuys of San Clemente, 32 years. My comments apply to e-bike use on the beach trail only. Use of electric bikes on other trails and sidewalks must be addressed too, but abuse on the beach trail and the trail itself requires special attention. 1, the beach trail is a valuable asset to San Clemente, unique in California. More than just an amenity for residents, it is an economic driver for our city, attracting visitors from throughout SoCal. 2, the quality of the experience of trail users is essential to maintaining its value. We must protect the quality of that experience just as we must protect the asset itself. 3, because it is a high value asset, budgeting to patrol and enforce regulations on the beach trail should be a priority. 4, e-bikes are not difficult to distinguish from pedal bicycles. Anyone can learn to identify an e-bike on site. I'll be happy to provide instruction free of charge. 5, e-bikes are prone to excessive speed. Nobody buys an e-bike to ride at 10 miles per hour, and even the most conservative e-bikes are capable of 20 miles per hour. Compare this with the pedal bicycles, which most people cannot accelerate to 20 miles per hour, and only a few can ride at 15 miles per hour. Most pedal bicycles are ridden between 10 and 15 miles per hour on the beach trail. Speed enforcement on the beach trail should be economically self-liquidating. It is not necessarily to engage OCSD in the effort. Speed limits on the trail will be set by city ordinance, enforceable by code compliance or park rangers. A simple radar device used to measure Little League baseball pitches costs $200. A few hours on a summer morning will yield enough citation revenue to pay the device and the ranger's time. Intermittent enforcement generating a few dozen citations each time will get the word out that San Clemente is serious about behavior on the trail. 7, simpler than speed enforcement, a ban on e-bikes is not reasonable. Nobody needs an e-bike to ride the trail for either enjoyment or transportation utility. E-bikes can traverse our town legally and safely in bike lanes on city streets. The hills, which are barriers to pedal bicyclists, are easily ridden on an e-bike. The beaches served by the beach trail can be reached on pedal bicycles as they've been for decades. 8, pedal bicycle access should be permitted. All Class 1 multi-use paths in Orange County are open to all forms of human power. Families drive to San Clemente from all over SoCal and park once at the pier, California, or North Beach to bike the trail. They patronize businesses at the Pier Bowl, Del Mar, and North Beach, and without bicycle access to the trail would drive to different locations and prowl for limited parking. 9, the beach trail is the only level route between Calafia and North Beach and serves both Metrolink and Amtrak platforms. As such, it promotes multimodal transportation, bicycle on train, reducing car dependence for commuters. Forcing pedal bike riders to use city streets will reduce their number. Respectfully, Pete Van Nuys, Executive Director, Orange County Bicycle Coalition.
All right, the next is Sherry Grace. Hello, first I want to say I appreciate your efforts in discussing this issue. I know it's a difficult topic to resolve as there are so many different elements to making the trail safe, but also enjoyable for all. Since I have written in several times on this topic, I just want to reiterate the potential safety issues and observations I have seen with e-bikes on our coastal beach trail since the last meeting. I walk the trail almost daily between the hours of 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. I walk from Riviera Beach to the end of the pier and back. During my walk at this time, there's rarely a time that we do not experience e-bikes whizzing past us with no warning that they are approaching at very unsafe speeds. Yes, we ask them to slow down. Yes, we jump from being startled as they pass. And yes, they are too close to others on the trail. I have taken photographs of e-bikes that have surfboard side racks attached to the bike that outreach the length of the bike handlebars, which is also an issue when trying to pass others on the trail. There is also another concern. T Street Beach on the sand is beginning to look like an e-bike parking lot. There is nowhere to park these bikes and lock them up, so they are congregated by the lifeguard tower. This could also potentially create a safety hazard for any emergencies. In addition, as discussed, there is zero enforcement of these bikes. Just the other day, I took a video of 3 to 4 e-bike riders at the Pier Bowl entrance passing a lifeguard Jeep that was also headed in the same direction. Not a word was said to the bikers, even though they passed in plain sight. It would have been nice if the lifeguard could have at least asked them to walk their bikes. During the last meeting, I believe it was mentioned that the park rangers rarely have observed any violators. I just want to say, in all my years walking the trail, I have never seen a park ranger on it. I know they have been seen near the parking lots by others, but not on the actual trail where the enforcement is most needed. There's also an issue with the bikes on the pier. Many are at the end where they are fishing or parked along the rails while people are dining. There are bike racks at the base of the pier that are hardly used. E-bikes continue to be an issue on the trail, and I don't foresee this getting any better come summer. I would love to see some sort of enforcement of the violators, as I know there are some that do follow the rules, and I would hate to ruin it for them. But until such time there is a way to enforce, what are the alternatives? If you would like copies of the photos/videos, please let me know and I'd be happy to forward. Sherry Grace, 35-year resident.
Our next comment is from Anonymous. Thank you for taking the time to read my commentary on the agenda item 4A regarding the use and regulation of e-bikes on trails in San Clemente. While I agree there are some individuals that need to learn how to appropriately operate an e-bike in the vicinity of pedestrians, I cannot support the use of local government oversight to enforce a new and unnecessary ordinance when there are so many more pressing issues. Until the city provides a solution to our increasing homeless population, decreases the unnecessary and costly lawsuits, remedies the railway horn nuisance, and provides actual maintenance of our canyon trails, this e-bike conversation should not remotely be addressed. We have unfortunate homeless men and women drinking 6-packs of Smirnoff Ice by the pier without reprimand, sleeping or camping on our public sidewalks by popular restaurants or on Del Mar's benches and library. These people need a safe place to heal from whatever pain got them to this point before we as a city worry about an annoying bike issue. Until the city stops financially crippling and unnecessary lawsuits and uses the funds allocated to railway maintenance to remedy the air that caused the horns to blare night and day, this e-bike issue needs to be a non-issue. Until the city uses their funds to monitor water runoff and public waste disposal in our canyons, the minor problem of a few e-bike users being rude should be tabled for discussion at a later date. This commentary is intentionally redundant to show just a few of the more pressing issues our city council should spend their energy, resources, and time to solve. This e-bike complaint doesn't even come close. To be honest, if a minor issue like bikes gets this much attention, shouldn't the city seek to regulate where fire succulents are planted, considering the sap from these plants can permanently blind someone? I think it's important the city doesn't lose sight of the issues that really matter. Resolving the homelessness in our great city, stopping unnecessary and financially draining lawsuits, railway horn issue, canyon runoff, and pollution maintenance, to name a few.
The next is from Jill Watson. Hello, my name is Jill Watson, a San Clemente resident and homeowner for 35 years. I have owned my e-bike for 10 years, way before the current fad that is happening now in San Clemente. I love riding my electric bike around San Clemente, especially down PCH and onto the trail at North Beach to the pier. I don't want to see e-bikes banned from the beach trail. I know they are now very popular, so the trail is getting busier. I feel the majority of bike riders are respectful of others on the trail. I also know summer and certain times of the day/week are busier with people out enjoying our beach trail. I would like to offer some suggestions to help improve all of us getting along on our beach trail. 1, walking all bikes on the bridge should be a must. We used to have a sign on the northbound side that said that, but I don't see it anymore. There should be a sign on both entrances of the bridge saying you must walk your bike. 2, if you are in a hurry, don't use the trail. It is for enjoyment, not a replacement of the roads. 3, there should be better signs on the ground at both the north and south side of the pier, where right now it only says walk bikes headed northbound. There's nothing on the south side to indicate riders should be walking their bikes. Most of the time when I'm on the trail, I ride my bike on manual so I can enjoy the beauty of the ocean and the trail. That might also be a requirement. People need to be more aware of how fast they are riding their bikes for everyone's safety. I would hate to see bikes removed from the beach trail because of a few who are not courteous. Please continue to allow e-bikes on our beach trail. Thank you very much, Jill Watson.
Our next comment is from Joan of San Clemente. Please consider that even though the canyon trails do not have as much pedestrian traffic, there are steep hills and blind curves. It only takes one person breaking the rules to cause a serious injury. The e-bikes are motorized vehicles that should not be on the trails. Case in point, we were almost hit today by an out-of-control biker on the trails. Also yesterday, there were 5 bikes, the day before 3 dirt bikes. We've seen 2 trucks in the last week. There isn't much enforcement. Also, there are bikes that are doing donuts and tearing up the grass at Bernice Ayres.
The next is from McDonald. A majority of people on the e-bikes do not follow the rules of the road or the rules for the trail. They go way too fast on the beach trail and have scared many people and dogs. I have seen many altercations. I think they are okay on the beach, but not on the trail. It is far too narrow for their use. I am a bike rider and support the use of bikes and e-bikes, just not okay with the high speeds and lack of consideration for fellow beach trail users. Thank you.
Our next comment is from Anonymous. Thank you for your time this evening to consider my thoughts on item 4A on the agenda. While I don't agree with any restriction placed on the general public due to the foolish action of a few, I'd like to provide some alternative solutions that would allow e-bikes to use the trails but provide oversight in a way that generates income for the city. I'll save my time to cover the potential solutions instead of point out the flawed logic behind local government oversight over the law-abiding masses to attempt to prevent the thoughtless actions of a few. Potential solution: have e-bikers that intend to use the trails register with the city for a nominal fee, $10 per year, and through this process review rules and regulations of sharing the road/trails with pedestrians. Use a sticker on the handlebars to see if registration is current. This option generates income for the city, provides education of proper e-bike conduct, and avoids limiting access to beach trails. An alternative option would be to create a bike lane on the trail, but this would cost the city money to generate it. Plus, the CDP would need to be required to expand that limited area. Thank you for considering alternatives.
And the last comment is from Bonnie Barnes, RSCCA Board President. Fire and safety hazards have increased with the introduction of e-bikes on the city's Ridgeline Trail. With no enforcement to stay on the trail, e-bikes go off trail into the open space fire zones. Lithium batteries located near the ground level on e-bikes are known to spark fires in very severe high fire zones. As there is no penalty for trespassing off trail into the fire zone, e-bikes now add to the risk of fire along with motorcyclists who do the same thing. Please certify and enable park and rec staff or other employees to issue e-bike fines for speeding and off-trail trespassing. The revenues can be used by the city to pay for fire zone maintenance along the sides of the 3.5-mile long Ridgeline Trail, which doubles as a paved utility service road. Under CAPRC 4291A, the city is required to maintain fire zone clearance along structures such as the paved service road that are controlled and operated by the agency. Please note, as the insurance industry has dropped insurance coverage of residences in high fire zone areas, Rancho San Clemente residents have lost coverage upon the date of annual renewal. Please protect the open space and residential areas near the city's Ridgeline Trail by issuing fines in accordance with the ordinances and prohibiting Class 3 e-bikes. Respectfully, Bonnie Barnes, RSCCA Board President.
Okay, so Miley, Samantha, that's all the public comment we have? Excellent. Okay, so the public comment portion of agenda item 4A is now closed. And so we bring it into the fold for us. You know, the last several meetings I've attempted to streamline the process to make it as efficient as possible. And I'd like to attempt to do that again tonight by first addressing the smaller topics, if you will, not out of importance, but because obviously the public is really focused on the beach trail. The agenda item is intended to cover inland trails and the parks as well. But we don't get a lot of action or a lot of traction on those two topics. So if I may begin with that, and Samantha, what rules right now exist with regard to riding a bike, electric or otherwise, in the parks?
At this time, it's not specified. No motorized vehicles are permitted on trails, and that typically is intended to mean a dirt bike or some type of motorcycle. That's not permitted on our sidewalks, on the turf fields, or on the inland trails, or the beach trail for that matter. But it's generally not that specific to e-bikes.
Okay, so we don't have any regulations regarding the use of bicycles on inland trails unless you extrapolate out an e-bike being a motorized vehicle. If you go that far, then you have some.
Correct. Yes, it is
Yeah.
not specific to e-bikes. Bicycles are permitted on all of our trails, and they're permitted within our parks, and the parks that's obviously not allowed on the turf.
Yeah, on the sports field portion, bikes
Correct.
are not allowed on it. Motorized vehicles are not allowed on the turf or the interior pathways within the park.
That's correct. I do think there is merit to potentially specify on some of our park rules signage that bicycles, motorized bicycles, e-bikes are not permitted on our turf whatsoever. We are seeing damage caused onto some of our fields, and that's not just e-bikes. We see vehicles on our fields as well. So to have very clear language on our signage will be an effort that I think needs to come forward.
Okay, and so just so that everybody is clear, the agenda item is broad, but the directive from the department and what was sent to us from City Council is really to address 1232-130, which is bike use at the beach and the beach trail and the access points there too. But this got broader, so we'll spend most of our time discussing the beach trail, I think. And so does anybody want to start off talking about the parks? Do we need an ordinance that specifies a prohibition against riding bikes in parks in general or on any of the sport fields, the turf fields, anything of that sort? And again, this is just as the parks. Anybody want to jump in on this one?
And Samantha, sorry, just one other, I just make sure I heard correctly. Apologize for potentially repeating. Currently, the signs within our parks state that no bike or motorized vehicle are allowed on the turf, correct?
Yes, I don't know that it's specific to the turf. I believe it's not. I know on the synthetic turf, absolutely, it's specific. I'd have to confirm. If it's not, it certainly needs to be added. I know that it does not. There is no specificity related to e-bikes, though.
Yeah.
That at a minimum is not listed. I know that.
I mean, Steve, I'd be willing to make a motion to amend, modify, add some language around ensuring that and how we go about it is how we go about it. We can talk about it, but that we seek to minimize damage to either turf or grass as it pertains to e-bikes. That seems to be low-hanging fruit to me.
Would be something along the lines of a maximum speed for any bicycle within a park and then a prohibition against riding on turf.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Anybody else? I'm not asking you to make that motion just yet, but does anybody else have any general comments on parks?
Is there, John Dory, is there and Sam, you would know better than, well, than most, and better than me, for sure. But when it comes to the parks themselves, are there areas where people, generally speaking, have been riding bicycles and it's not a problem for the city because it's kind of an area that is kind of designated for that? Or are they, I mean, is it where people now just ride up and into the parking lot and they can put their bikes there, then you walk over the grass or whatever, they go to wherever they're going to use the field? What is normal, I guess, is the point. What is the city trying to get to when it comes to how the park is used by bicycles? Are you uncomfortable right now the way bikes are used, and you want us to shore this up a little bit?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I think the biggest concern from a staff perspective and a maintenance perspective is the The use of bicycles, whether it's a dirt bike, an e-bike, or a pedal bicycle, there's folks that actually do that. They use them on our turf. They use them at San Gregorio on the fields, and it causes damage. A comment made about Bernie Sayre, Forster Ranch Park. We've received multiple calls of folks out there using their e-bikes and really essentially doing donuts on the grass fields. That's the biggest concern as it relates to parks. You know, I don't know that we want to restrict folks bringing a bike to a park. I mean, if you can imagine, there's kids that learn how to ride their bikes in our parks, and that's what they're great for. You know, getting your kid on a bicycle and taking the training wheels off and sending them down the sidewalk, that's wonderful, and we want our parks to be used like that. I think the concern, though, is when you get dangerous or reckless use of those bicycles on the sidewalks. But staff, for me, I don't see an issue with the use of bicycles within the parks. It's on the grass field where there's damage that's caused. A sidewalk is hardy enough that you're not gonna hurt the sidewalk, but it will damage the fields, whether that's artificial or natural turf. So.
Okay, so getting back to Charlie's motion, as long as it stays regards the staying off the grass and the turf and anything that's floral out there, that's where your biggest concern is, and that would be something the staff would appreciate versus, but just to bar them from, because people have to get to the park. They have to go from someplace to the park. So they're going to bring their bicycle. So we can't ban them from being in the park, but you've got to create necessary areas for them. And maybe they're already there for them to park them and store them or lock them up or whatever.
Hey, Samantha,
Yes.
would something like bicycle riding can only occur on hardscape and not to exceed 8 miles per hour? Would something like that capture your concerns?
I don't think so. I mean, there's always going to come back to the age-old question of, well, where's the enforcement, and where does that land?
Yeah.
I think what is enforceable is absolutely there's no e-bikes, bicycles, dirt bikes, nothing is allowed on the fields, and that's where we're seeing a lot of our heavy maintenance costs in turf replacement almost on a weekly basis at this point.
Bernie?
Yeah, I have a question, Sam. Liberty Park, the damage to that field, is that caused from e-bikes? Because they look more like that was maybe
That was a
truck of some sort. Okay.
You are correct.
Yeah, so is there a reason we're not discussing driving trucks on the fields?
I think
see where I'm going with this is driving anything on the fields is, I think we can all agree, not a wise thing. It just seems, I understand. My first question was maybe what's the problem we're trying to solve here? You've answered that, the destruction of our turf. I'm not sure I would support a speed limit or defining hardscape and that sort of thing, but certainly just nothing other than feet on the turf, so to speak, chairs. But I don't know, I guess I'm struggling with those tire tracks have been there for at least a month and a half, probably, on Liberty. And I haven't seen anything agendized to talk about driving a truck on our turf. So
the vehicles as a whole are, and so the commission's aware, Liberty Park is hit frequently by vandalism. Somebody has been repeatedly driving vehicles onto that turf, onto the soccer field. And we don't know if it's the same person. OCSD, I know, is looking into it. And our park rangers have done their best to mitigate that. We are also locking that field, and it doesn't seem to be stopping it. So I think as a whole, Bernie, to your point, Motorized vehicles, whether that's a car, a truck, an e-bike, a bicycle, anything like that, really should not be used on the fields. And I do want to also specify that if we look at prohibiting something within a park, I don't know that there's a need to include that prohibition within our municipal code. I think the intention related to the prohibition of something like this in our parks would be added to our park rules. You know, we have park rules listed in every park site. They're there, so they can be referenced if there's a violation of that rule. But that's in those, a lot of those park rules don't live in a municipal code necessarily. So that's what we're really talking about here is addressing the park rules. Unless council wants to look to codify those rules, that would be their decision, or the commission wants to recommend that.
Do I make a comment?
Yeah, Richard, go ahead.
Could that be addressed just with additional signage? Just making more clear and more visible what the rules are. It seems like that's a contributor to solutions on the beach trail with regards to speed limit, as well as motorized vehicles in any park area. It seems like signage is a good solution.
I agree. I think signage would help, and I would have to find out from an enforcement standpoint if and when OCSD gets called out to an incident. I know oftentimes they prefer, or even code enforcement of the park rangers, they prefer that there's a code attached to the rule, and that's generally the backing behind why you see a municipal code referenced, because it gives them a greater ability to enforce that kind of rule or policy. But I think signage at a minimum is needed to start informing the public that it's not permitted.
Well, not to play attorney, right? But I would think that you know, a truck driving up onto the turf, you know, at Liberty Park or whatever the case may be, would be construed as vandalism, would it not? And that's codified, is it not?
Yes, that is destructive if it's over a certain dollar value. And I do say, to not get us off the topic of e-bikes and bicycles, because
Right.
yes, Liberty has a problem, but we are seeing issues. Granted, you're maybe not seeing them as closely or as far away, I should say. You know, some of them, we've talked about it, the larger tires on e-bikes do cause damage to turf if they are driven aggressively or recklessly on turf. So that's to kind of bring us full circle. That's the idea behind that kind of prohibiting the use of those.
Steve, is it too nebulous to say? I think I got the turf thing. Is it too nebulous to say, you know, within park rules that if you're going to ride your bike on the sidewalk, that you ride it at a safe speed, as opposed to actually having like an enforceable speed limit, which we all know is going to probably be pretty difficult. You know, because
I mean, we could do the reckless. The reckless language is a nice catch-all for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because you know, in certain instances, maybe 8 miles an hour, and I don't even know what 8 miles an hour feels like on a bike per se, because I just don't know how fast I'm going on a bike from time to time. But like maybe sometimes 8 miles an hour is too much. Maybe you're going 2 miles an hour and be too much.
Well, I think to Samantha's point, if her concern right now is bikes or motorized vehicles, and just keep in mind, so our municipal code does not define motorized vehicle. We have the term motorized vehicle in our code. We don't define it. So our code defers to the vehicle code. Motorized vehicle, an e-bike is a motorized vehicle in some circumstances, but not others. Like you can get a DUI on an e-bike, but you can't, but it doesn't fall into some of the other rules. So it's not really consistent whether an e-bike is a motorized vehicle or not, and we don't define it. I will say I did have a chance to pull up the code here. So we have an ordinance for motorized vehicles on municipal trails, and we bar them all together on municipal trails. I don't know, Samantha, if you think that includes the inland trails. But so motorized vehicles are barred.
It does include that. It does not.
Okay.
I think there's some ambiguity if that also would include an e-bike, because based on the assembly bill that was passed, why we're here is because that assembly bill states e-bikes should be treated as bicycles unless it's otherwise specifically defined.
Right, and that's why like a class 3, you can get a DUI on it. But
Correct.
we can define motorized vehicle in our code if we wanted to. We can define it to include the e-bike if we wanted, and then we just say no motorized vehicles on grass. That doesn't cover the manual bikes. So I think we're seeing a couple of spots that we need to fill in if we want to fill in. So hey, Bernie?
Steve, yeah, I have a thought. So to go back to the issue of parks and the problem that we need to solve first on our agenda here, I'd be interested in a motion that says, you know, I don't know how to phrase it, but nothing with wheels or tires on our turf, you know, or I guess that you couldn't do it that way because maybe a stroller or whatever, but you know, no bikes on the turf. I just, when I reflect on growing up and being a kid and going to the park, I mean, I got to the park with my bike and I rode not Liberty, it wasn't here, but certainly Verde Park. I mean, I'd ride those sidewalks through Verde Park with my friends all day long. I was talking to my son Jackson about that today. You know, leave in the morning and I'd ride to the beach. I'd ride all over the place. Part of being a kid, getting on a bike, going to the park, or at least it used to be. I guess now it's playing video games. But I don't want to overthink this. If the issue that we're having is destruction of turf, then I don't think that the addition of a speed limit or saying you can ride it on the sidewalks or whatever, I think we just address it and say on grass or artificial turf, no bikes. Because in my mind, I can't think of anything at any of our parks that would require the use of a bike on the turf. Because you could ride there, you could park, there's bike racks, there's places to put it, and then enjoy the park for its intended purpose. So that's where my head is for this particular issue.
Second.
Bernie, if I may, as I harken back to my childhood, I recall, like, for example, if there's a section of a park I wanted to go play soccer in, I would ride my bike all the way to that section. And that section may not be lined with concrete to get there. So I think there's probably a lot of kids riding off hard surface, but not causing damage. But I agree with you. We could try to craft something. I just don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I saw this just this last weekend. I saw a family show up to the park. Mom and dad were on e-bikes, and the youngest son was on an electric dirt bike. You know, kid was probably 8 years old. And I watched him ride all through the park, and the parents followed him, right? It was in the distance, but I saw it happen. I don't know what kind of damage it did. And, you know, at that point, there's maybe didn't know that it caused problems. They probably thought it wasn't an issue, or maybe there was just a breakdown in how families work. I don't know, but in my mind, I'm not sure how you write legislation to fix that, because in the era of COVID, where all you can do is go outside and ride a bike, you got a family that's doing something together, and we don't want them to be destructive. But, you know, I don't know. I struggle with all of this conversation, especially in light of the pandemic situation that we're in. So
Bernie, would you struggle less if it were something like a prohibition against reckless riding within the parks, including but not limited to causing damage to grass fields, turf fields? So you keep it more generic.
One point about that, though, because I tend to err on the side of thinking that members of our community are good, and I think sometimes, you know, granted it rarely rains here, as we all know, but sometimes there's just unintended consequences that occur. You know, someone's just not aware. They're just not thinking about it. They're out just having a good time with their family, and And then they ride through the park to Bernie's point, like, the kid, he doesn't know any better. And so he's riding his bike around, and that, maybe that destroys a section of the turf. I just, I think to Samantha's point, we do have to come up with something that can protect the fields from damage, because at the end of the day, it does cost money for the city to repair that damage, and some of that stuff's not cheap. So in an era when our revenues are constrained a bit, we gotta think about ways we can reduce our expenses. So.
Okay, so are we saying then no motorized vehicles or bicycles on the turf fields?
Well, that's the way I'm leaning. Yeah.
That seems like a super simple solution.
Yeah.
To me.
Who wants to make that motion so we can get off of parks?
So moved.
Can you, for Miley's benefit, Charlie, can you articulate the motion just a hair?
Okay, I'll try. I'll be ham-fisted way. Here we go. I'll make a motion that that the park rules be that they add. Park rules add a prohibition against riding bikes, or any other motorized vehicle on the turf in our parks.
Just to clarify your motion, are you seeking amendment or drafting of a municipal ordinance, or are you just suggesting we give the department permission to add another sentence?
Well, look, I think I'm open to both, but I'll defer to Samantha. Would it make better sense for that to be code, or is it better just to have that be a park rule? I guess.
Sorry, Charlie. Can I interrupt?
Yeah, go ahead,
John Bandrick, do you mind just hitting mute? I'm having a hard time hearing Charlie.
I apologize.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you.
Samantha, can you give us some advice on that?
Yeah, right now our park rules don't live in the municipal code section anywhere. So I think for simplicity, it's probably easier just to have the department add it at this point. And then if there's a need down the line, if OCSD expresses the need or code enforcement expresses the need, then we can look to codify it if that's the path. But right now, our park rules don't live in the municipal code. They're just stated typically.
Okay.
Well, so Charlie, your motion is to recommend that, or is to authorize the department to include in their rule set this particular prohibition.
Yes.
Everybody understand the motion? Is there a second on the motion? Who wishes to second it? Okay, for sake of conversation, I shall second the motion. Apparently there's some discussion needed, so discussion on the motion?
I would, my comment is that I would err on the side of pragmatism. I don't see any 8-year-old kids doing damage on turf or a park on a bicycle. I know I couldn't when I was 8 years old. However, that kid can on a motorized bike without understanding what he's doing. I still think the focus should be to specify no motorized vehicles and to include a definition of any e-bikes as a motorized vehicle. I think that's a solution to a lot of these problems. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I'd be willing to take that as a friendly amendment, Steve. That we drop bikes from turf.
Just a comment on that. Anytime you get water on grass and you put a bicycle across it, you're going to do damage. So I appreciate the fact that the degree of damage can be intensified by e-bike, but don't underestimate a bicycle with very narrow wheels. On the PSI on that's pretty severe. And if you And if you're out riding around and it's real wet or damp, you know what you can do to muddy trails or whatever. It just leaves you can go down an inch or two easily.
Well, I will say this. I think part of the reason why we're on this point, and part of the reason why we're probably seeing an uptick in this type of activity is, hearkening back to my youth, right? Riding your bike on the grass was never that fun because you can't go that fast, right? Unless you were Hercules. And but with the e-bikes, they got some pretty good speed to them, and so it's a little bit more entertaining to be on the grass with an e-bike. So I'd be willing to take Richard's friendly amendment and just drop the bikes and just no motorized vehicles to include e-bikes.
Okay, so if I may comment on the motion then. So one of the positions I've taken for quite some time on this topic is that there is no functional difference between the e-bike and a bike other than who's pedaling. And so if you have an e-bike, but you're not using the motor, are you less destructive to grass than if you're using the motor? Or if your motor has died because you didn't charge it last night and you got down to the park and realized, oh, I have to pedal home, this is terrible. So for me, I've always viewed regular bikes and e-bikes in the same category. They can both be abused, they can both be misused, and they can both be heavy. And nowadays, it's even hard to tell an e-bike from a regular bike unless they got a giant battery on them. So I prefer the original motion to include bikes, because that's the issue we're trying to get through, is get the bikes off the grass. So those are my comments on. So Charlie, you indicated a desire to amend your motion. So can you state for Miley your amended motion?
Right.
If I may, Chair Strager, really quickly, if you want to specifically address motorized vehicles and banning that, e-bikes aside or bicycles aside, I would recommend then we amend, it's the municipal code, section 10.68.010, prohibition of motorized vehicles on municipal trails, and I think it probably should include and parks. Is that the desire of the commission? Because we're looking to eliminate that motorized vehicle. Right now, it's not specified.
Here's my question, Sam. If I heard you correctly, Sam, you said the state assembly said that e-bikes need to be treated as bikes and that they don't fall under the motorized vehicle class?
Correct. So that assembly bill, it states that e-bikes are treated as bicycles unless it's otherwise declared by the local municipality.
So
with the exception of class 3, those are not permitted.
Fair enough. I think I agree with Steve in part on this, that bikes are bikes are bikes. I don't know that I am in favor of classifying e-bikes as motorized vehicles to change across the board for our code. I will say that I support the original motion that just said, hey, don't ride bikes on the turf. And that would include e-bikes. My assumption is that this is not part of our code. This is a, hey, don't do it. You're not going to go to jail if you do it. So if an 8-year-old kid rides across the turf and doesn't cause any problems, then it's not a big deal, but at least there's some recourse if a 16-year-old kid rides across the turf and creates some problems. So I'd like to support the original motion and not get into the specifics of calling out just an e-bike. I think John Dory brought up a good point that regular bicycles, a lot of times our fields are soaking wet anyway. You can do damage just by walking out on them. So I think the bike's good.
So the floor goes back to Charlie. Charlie had an original motion. The motion was withdrawn and amended. We did not get to the seconding of the amended motion. So Charlie, I need you to state clearly what your motion is. Let's see if there's a second, and then we'll go from there.
Okay.
You just volunteered to do this, and look at that.
All right. And I it sounds like Samantha was saying that, just for clarification on this one, Steve, it sounds like Samantha was saying that it might make sense for us to seek to amend the code that she referenced. Is that, so sorry, just want to make sure we're clear before we get into this with another motion. Are we're
Samantha, do you mind if I take this?
Go for it. Yeah. And
Okay.
it just, that was only specific to motorized, not
Yeah. So-
inclusive
Right.
of bikes.
Right, so Charlie, so we have a code already in place that prohibits motorized vehicles on trails. There's no definition of motorized vehicle in our code. So if we were going to tweak the code, right now it's motorized vehicles on trails. We'd have to say motorized vehicles on trails and on park turf. So that's the first thing we'd have to do. And then number two is we have to define motorized vehicles. Otherwise, we don't know where we're at. But modifying the code doesn't capture regular pedal bicycles. So I think for the first motion, we don't need to worry about the code that we already have in the post involving motorized
got it.
trails. Because I think that gets to too many gymnastics.
Yeah.
And so I agree with Sam, we don't need to codify it at the point, we just need to give the department direction as to what to add in the rules. So are we telling them, add to your rules, no bikes of any kind on turf, or are we saying, and no motorized vehicles and
Right.
bikes on turf, or are we saying motorized vehicles and e-bikes on turf?
Got it. Okay.
Pedal
All right,
bikes.
I'll try to thread the needle here.
Yes.
Make a motion to add to the park rules a prohibition on motorized vehicles, e-bikes, and bicycles on the turf in our parks.
Is there a second on that? Bernie has seconded. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor indicate affirmance by raising your hand so the camera can see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then Richard, you're a no?
No.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 1. Okay, so that matter passes. Thank you. Okay, inland trails. Same discussion. I guess, Samantha, first of all, is there an issue with bikes, e-bikes, or anything on the inland trails that you're aware of?
We're not hearing as much of a concern as we do as compared to the beach trail. I think there's concern regarding the motorized vehicles, but that's addressed separately already in our code. We hear a few complaints or concerns, but I do believe most of our inland trails are wide enough to accommodate bicycles, oftentimes mini bicycles. And they certainly, those back trails are meant even for mountain biking and things like that. So the one other trail would be the Sea Summit Trail. That does have some pretty narrow little pinch points and turning areas. But that's the extent of it. And this is coming, council had originally asked that we look at all trails, including the beach trail. So that's why it's here today.
Can I make a suggestion, unless anybody feels strongly about it? I feel like we can probably leave the trail thing alone. You know, we have a code section that says no motorized vehicles. To the extent there's an issue and the sheriff's department gets involved, they have what they need. They can figure out if they're going to deem this bike a motorized vehicle or not. We don't have to legislate that. Because I don't know what's going on the trails where an e-bike or regular bike would be any different from going fast. But does anybody feel differently? Like, do you want to tackle the trails right now?
I'm okay with that too, Steve. I think the one thing I just mentioned is I wonder if we should, just because it keeps coming up, and I don't want to burn too many calories on it, but is whether or not we separate out the Sea Summit Trail from the rest of the inland trails, just because it's been brought up a couple times. Just a point of discussion.
Yeah, I don't know why we would designate it differently. I worry about picking a trail and having rules for just that trail. But, you know, we do it for parks. We used to have certain rules for certain parks all over the place. Now we've got a little bit more uniformity. But still, if you're an e-bike and you're going reckless on the Sea Summit Trail, somebody call up the sheriff's department, they can cite you under this code section as a motorized vehicle.
Yeah, Steve, I get out on the Sea Summit Trail when I'm able to walk and stuff like that quite a bit. And I very rarely see a bike out there and stuff. And like was brought up already, you know, nobody's going to want to go up and down those stairs with an e-bike or any kind.
Those things are heavy.
Yeah, I just don't see bikes out there very often.
Okay, so are we cool then with leaving inland trails alone for now unless specifically directed otherwise by city council?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh,
So
John's got a point.
John's got a question, but he's on mute.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The only question I have, I don't see a problem, but is there anything in the rules that said that, you know, bikes and bicyclers must yield to pedestrians? I mean, anything that kind of gives the pedestrian the right of way out there, just so you don't get blown off the trail if you're a jogger or whatever. Do we need anything to just give them, you know, the high ground, so to speak, when it comes to somebody on a bike?
I'm not aware of anything. I think the rec department, like their park rules, I think the rec department can issue a rule and put up a sign that indicates that bikes should yield to pedestrians. Samantha?
Yeah, that very much similar to our park rules. All of our trails have a list of rules at the entry point. Certainly, and it could even speak to just no reckless use of bicycles or e-bikes as well. And then yielding to pedestrians and all that. That's doable. Wouldn't require a code amendment.
Do we have one of those signs that shows like people yielding to bikes and bikes yielding to spacecraft and, you know, that whole big triangle thing?
I don't know that those are on our trail. Can look into it. I actually know for sure they're not on at least the Sea Summit Trail, but
Okay. I know I've seen them with people, horses, strollers, and bikes. There's like a big circle of love. Well, does anybody want to do anything more on the inland trails? I don't want to, you know, close the party down too soon, but we got a big fish to fry still. So, okay, Samantha, I'm not seeing any interest in discussing this matter, nor do I see a need to table it for a future meeting. And so we're going to take it. We're going to have no action taken. And
okay.
If city council wants us to do something, they'll let us know.
Okay.
Or if you guys need to, you can agendize it too. Okay, so
I mean, I just to that point though, Steve, I think Samantha, I think city council can construe our I know maybe I'm overstepping my bounds here, but construe our lack of action to mean that we don't think there's any rules that have to be changed on the inland trails.
Yeah, I would reference that then in the staff report to council.
Okay.
That would be fine.
yes, and that we're confident in our department to establish their own rule that would cover whatever issues they have. And they don't normally come to us to ask permission to create a rule. This was just a more high profile issue, so they wanted us to, you know, anoint their rulemaking. And I think we did. So,
Well, just to the point of them wanting us to provide them direction, our direction is no change on that point.
correct. And in terms of inland trail, our recommendation is we do nothing.
Yeah.
And they'll tell us if they want us to do something. Okay, so what do we have left? Oh, just a little thing called the beach trail. All right, so as a reminder, bike riding is not allowed on the beach at all from June 15th through Labor Day. Bike riding is allowed on the beach trail, certain times, certain days, certain sections, hit or miss, wherever you are. The question is, one, are we going to treat e-bikes different than regular And two, assuming we're not going to treat them differently, are we going to make a broader rule about bike riding on the beach trail as a whole? So we've had several meetings on this. It seems to fall on the side of either you view the beach trail as a multi-use path, or you view it as a pedestrian scenic path, and therefore the different uses don't play nice together. Yes. So who wishes to begin with this conversation?
Question, Samantha, just because it dawned on me. As it pertains to ADA, are people allowed to ride those scooters on the beach trail? You know, the scooters that the folks that are
Yes.
they're allowed to ride those on the beach trail?
Yes, if it's an ADA related need, then absolutely yes.
Okay. Who wants to start the ball rolling?
I'll mention something here because I'm having a hard time concentrating anyway. But last meeting, I came in with the idea, let's get rid of all the e-bikes and bikes on the trail and stuff because it's just getting too crowded. And then, of course, between the police force and the other safety forces that we're mentioning, there doesn't seem to be any complaints or accidents that have happened along the trails that they mentioned. They said they don't get anything like that. And I know we're getting a lot of close calls, et cetera, et cetera. And, I'm for one, I don't know if I want to jump the gun and just say, well, let's ban everything. And when there isn't a real problem. So that's what I'm thinking of right now.
Yeah. I tend to agree with John.
I will say from my perspective, I was kind of in John's boat. The fact that the fire department and the sheriff's department, and for that matter, the park rangers, nobody seems to be on guard with issues on the beach trail, does seem to cut against the, I think, majority of comments we get from the public that are against bikes or e-bikes on the beach trail. And then I guess, the lawyer in me begs the question, well, it's a hot topic, it's been discussed, it's been vetted, it's been voted on, so next incident, or the first incident, whatever, you're not going to have a lack of notice as your defense because everybody's on notice that people complain and that it's an issue. So the question really turns on whether there was action taken. You may not be able to enforce a prohibition that easily, but having a prohibition is at least one step toward taking action against the problem. If you do nothing because you can't cure everything, to me, that is a greater evil. So even though I'm not sure of the magnitude of the problem, I am concerned about the magnitude of the optics on it. And so that's really kind of the direction I'm more concerned with.
Yeah. I wonder if a middle ground would be, and I like the suggestion that one of the citizens wrote in about talking about licensing. I don't know to what degree that works. I don't know. I don't know if it would be super helpful. I think that I'll just kind of go back to my point that I made earlier, is I think that generally people are good. I think generally people do not want to cause harm. I think it's, I think in some instances, right, you've got some immaturity with some of the riders, and maybe they just don't realize, that they're not able to kind of see the 2 steps ahead. what their impact of their actions can be. You know, of course, we're going to have some bad actors from time to time, but that's, you know, I don't know how to address that one per se, but I wonder if maybe it's not licensing, maybe it's an educational program, something along those lines that maybe you know, somebody mentioned a public service announcement, but maybe we go that extra step to say, you know, is there something that can be done to educate people as they ride on the trail to be more responsible, to be more courteous, more aware of others on the trail, you know, obviously to be cognizant of the rules that do exist, that, you know, you need to be walking your bike through the pier bowl, around the pier, the bridges by Rivy, you know, that kind of thing. I wonder if that's the step that we take, something along those lines, just as a you know, a kind of one more step than beyond what we've done already to try to help assuage concerns and potentially calm the situation down generally.
Anyone who has not spoken yet wish to throw a hat into this room?
Well,
Yes, John.
yeah, a couple of comments here. I was reading through what we currently have, and it's very specific that we have identified certain areas that are problem areas. The Riviera Beach bridge is a problem area. They said you can't ride across it. Same with the Montalvo Beach Trail area. That's a problem area. We know that the south from the pier to Trafalgar is a problem area, and we say we can't, certain times of the year you can't ride your bicycle. So we already have rules in place in certain areas. The areas that are not addressed in here is the distance between, or that stretch between DA and the pier. That is really tight. That's down to 5 feet for a long period of time, long stretch, excuse me. And that's an area I think we need to look at. And I'm also concerned about the Mariposa Bridge. So we can either say, let's just educate everybody and be done with it, and then everybody will figure it out. But which I think is good. I think education is good. I've had somebody call me just before we went on here and said that would be good. We can maybe get together with the police officers and have somebody get a sticker if they go through the program. And part of the process is showing them how to navigate through this area. But we still have to have rules in place for them to learn. Just unleashing the hounds, I think, on this needs to change. I do not like 10 miles an hour. I think that's too fast. You can't, if you say 10, people are going to go 12 to 15. If you say 6, they'll go 7 or 8, maybe. You know, everybody goes a little bit faster. We do it on the freeways. They're going to do it here. So I think you're setting yourself up for a problem by setting the miles per hour too high. I think we need to address that. Or at least I'd like to have some discussion on it. If I lose that one, I lose it, but I think it needs to be discussed. And the other one is I think we need to discuss what happens between DA and the pier, and we need to discuss what happens on Mariposa. Those two, if we're gonna stay with what we have here, I think they still need to address those two locations, because they could be problem areas. Because I know I've seen people whip around in there on bicycles, even a little too fast, and just weave in and out of people up on Mariposa on the bridge. And down in that little area, you can't get a bike past a stroller. You just can't do it. So it has to be addressed. Somebody's got to give. You got to get off the bike, whatever it is, but it has to be addressed. That's my 10 cents. Steve.
I know. Forgot to click my button. So I've expressed this in the past too. I agree that the bridges are not suitable for riding. In part because sometimes the bridges are a place where people stop also, especially Mariposa. When we originally tackled this many years ago, I seem to recall that we suggested no bike riding on all the bridges. And I seem to recall that part got cut out. But what's happening is if we put in like, okay, you can ride for 150 yards, but then you come upon something, that means you stop. Then you go another 150 yards, then you got to stop and walk. And I mean, the more times we put things in here where people have to stop, the less likely they're going to like get up to 30 miles an hour in between the pinch points. But as we know, there's no enforcement. So a pinch point is either going to stop them from riding or they're just going to fly right through. So I have a hard time going in and carving out pinch points that are a problem and giving them special treatment. And if we designate a pinch point as no riding, but we don't designate another one, and we allow riding in that section, and that's where the big incident occurs, then we got some explaining to do. Why did we pick this one and not the other one? I'm in favor of dropping the speed limit if that would make a difference and at least show that we're doing something. We originally proposed 8 miles an hour. We sent it to city council, or maybe we did 6. I don't remember. Maybe Samantha remembers. It was either 6 or 8. And then they came back with 10. But, I don't know, 5 miles an hour is a good, steady jog. So if I'm riding my bike and a jogger is basically the same speed as me, then I'm okay. That's a comfortable, pleasant riding speed. I'm not getting anywhere anytime soon, but that's not the point of the beach trail. The beach trail is not the alternative to the 405 freeway. It's intended for something else. So if we're not going to ban bikes altogether, then I feel dropping the speed limit another step is at least a strong statement that we care about this issue. And we're not just waiting for the big one before we do something. But I want to hear from Richard because I know he's got strong feelings about this. At least he did at the last meeting.
Well, I remember when we discussed this before, we agreed on this. I had suggested a lower speed limit because I think that it's quite clear if someone is going over 10 miles an hour versus less than 10 miles an hour. So I think John's idea is really good. I think 5 or 6 or 7 miles an hour is realistic. You can tell if someone is going faster than that. I think people who want to get somewhere on a bike, there are a lot of options in this city. There are beach trails or beach pathways through the city. If they want to ride down to Trussell's, they can do so. If they want to ride to T Street or Lost Windows, they can do so. But they don't have to charge 20 miles an hour down the beach trail with 2 sets of boards on their bikes. It seemed like we didn't tackle the issue of e-bikes 2 years ago or 3 years ago because they weren't an issue. I think we're kind of dancing around this elephant in the corner, which are e-bikes. It's e-bikes that are causing the problem, not guys on bikes, not kids on bikes. They don't ride them anywhere near as recklessly as the e-bikes do. We're supposed to be representing the city of San Clemente and its residents in their majority. And I think the majority of people, myself included, sees evidence of consistent misuse of e-bikes in terms of courteousness with each other, in terms of the speed limit, period. I see it elsewhere, but I'm not going to talk about. I tried to address that with the policeman last week. They don't enforce municipal codes about riding e-bikes on sidewalks, riding double and triple on e-bikes, riding without helmets, riding underage. We're not charged with that. We're charged with one issue right now, which is what the city council asked us for. Focus on e-bikes, which are causing a problem with the populace of San Clemente on the beach trail. That should be our focus. And I think my 2 cents is, I agree with Mr. Van Nuys that I think you can separate an e-bike from a bike. I think we can make that distinction if we want to. I think people have used historically the beach trail for access to other parts of the city. I have myself for 30 years. I think we can separate the two. But again, a speed limit, as John suggested, would solve that. You simply can't ride 10 or 15 miles an hour, as Pete suggested. You don't ride an e-bike at 8 miles an hour. You ride it at 15 or 20. That's why they're fun. That's why people are doing it, because they're trying to get somewhere and having a blast with their buddies. So I think that would alone. So the question is whether we should tackle trying to separate bikes from e-bikes as an issue. That's my long-winded answer.
Oh, that's totally fine, Richard. I appreciate that. And I won't repeat my position about how I think it's too difficult to distinguish the two, and anything we do should be across the board. A speed limit drop across the board would certainly impact e-bike riders more than regular bike riders. Because if we dropped it down to, let's just say 6, just for fun, because e-bikes are so heavy, I think it's not that much fun to ride it at 6. But a regular bike is not as much of a challenge, I think.
Can I make one more suggestion in terms of what John's comment was? I looked at this municipal code 1232-130. I agree that we need to have some more inclusion and contrast with what you said, Steve, about areas like the Mariposa Bridge where they should be walked. You know, I ride a lot from Dana Point back to Riviera, and it's pretty simple to get off your bike and walk it. Then you hop on between the bridge and the pier. Then you walk it, and when you're south of T Street, you can ride your bike. I don't think you're going to be on and off. But I agree that we need to be more specific, include more areas in that definition of where year-round bikes should only be walked. I think that would be something that we could suggest to City Council, and they would probably be in favor of. I'm trying to think in terms of how they're going to react to this, thinking about what Charlie's suggestion about, do we want to tackle inland trails or let City Council think that we haven't even considered it? So.
Anybody else have any thoughts on this?
I do. So we have a rule on the beach trail for no reckless riding already. So we have rules on the beach trail already. So I'm not sure that saying that we haven't addressed it is fair. I mean, we've beaten this thing to the ground. I do want to remind you, like John Dandrick said, we had Orange County Sheriff here. They said we don't have any known reports of problems. Orange County Fire said the same thing. Code enforcement said the same thing. All three of them also said that they do get lots of reports of problems on our streets, but none on our beach trail. You can pedal an electric bike without using the power assist. So that's where I think I agree with Steve in that I don't think we can distinguish between the two. You can certainly identify the difference between the two, but there's fat tire bikes that don't have batteries, and there's e-bikes that have skinny tires and that are very small. I went out and measured my fat tire bike with my surfboard on it, and it is no wider with my surfboard than the handlebars are, and it's certainly more narrow than a double wide stroller, which my wife and I used to walk with on that trail. I could get behind lowering the speed limit. My biggest issue with that is enforcement, and if it's a perception thing and that gets people to slow down, great. But I think that we can all agree that the problem here is recklessness, and recklessness is coming from folks who are already not following our rules. I mentioned it earlier, and I picked my son up down at the Muni today from his golf lesson, and I was talking to a couple of the employees. I said, when was the last time you saw people standing 3 people deep at the driving range waiting for a lane? Never. But in the current environment we're in, everybody is out doing things outside. And the beach trail is a multimodal trail and people are doing things outside. And I'd love to see kids wearing helmets. I'd love to see them wearing them buckled. I'd love to see kids being safe. But I gotta tell you, I am so excited that I'm seeing so many more kids out and about outside. I think it's one of the few silver linings on this whole pandemic. And so I am not interested in banning anything from the beach trail. As I'm talking through it, I could get behind the 8-mile-an-hour speed limit that we talked about a couple years back. We have a new council. Maybe they'll be more receptive to it. But I'm not interested in banning e-bikes, and I respectfully disagree with Richard on this. I don't think that e-bikes are the problem. I think that disrespectful people and inconsiderate people are the problem. I see plenty of respectful people on e-bikes.
Okay, so Bernie, can I ask you a question? So we know we have the reckless riding portion. We also know from the last meeting, which I think was something of a sobering reality for a lot of us, was that there is not only no real enforcement, but there's no real enforcement on the horizon that we can look to. And so for me, I understand lowering the speed limit might not be enforceable, but there is a public perception that we're doing something. There's also the rider perception of, dude, I'm going way over the speed limit. I'm not just a hair over, I'm like super over. This could be a problem. What if we put a maximum speed at 5? You know, there's still gonna be people riding over it. But at 5 miles an hour, I think it's very difficult to get an e-bike going in such a way that it's going to run into people, or people have to dive out of the way on something like that. And I understand it's not enforceable, or we don't have the mechanism to enforce. But also, no one's going to complain about a bike going 5 miles an hour. They're going to complain about the bike going 20 miles an hour.
Which is fine. I also think if we set that limit too low, it becomes something that almost feels like it's meant to be broken. And you said something that just it gets to me, the hyperbole of having someone dive out of the way. I fully understand being startled on the beach trail. I walk it. I've been startled by reckless people on bikes, period. And I get it. I hate to say it, but I'm not sure anyone's had to dive out of the way of a bike, right? And I know you said it, but these close calls, being startled is horrible, and especially when you're out enjoying the trail. But someone, again, I know I've seen too many respectful people using that trail with bikes to, in good conscience, do anything to affect their ability to be respectful and use that trail with a bike. Considering it's a minority of folks who are being disrespectful on bicycles and jogging and walking shoulder to shoulder with strollers and not being able to get by. It's an issue of respect, and I still stand by the fact that we cannot legislate respect.
I think so, Bernie. I think I've come around to the conclusion as well that a full-out ban might be a bigger bite than this bagel needs. If we add Mariposa into the list of bridges that you can't ride on, that you got to walk on, and then we drop the speed limit down, I do think that people who wanted bikes gone will be satiated enough, and the bike riders will be grateful they haven't been banned and will be, respectful of the speed, knowing that a ban could happen. That's maybe how a community works together.
Steve, on the point about speed limit, do we also provide guidance to council on enforcement, or is that outside of our purview?
I think it's not one, it's not in our purview. Two, I think it's not realistic. I mean, they're the ones that have to allocate enough funds to the Orange County Sheriff Department to get us the extra manpower to be able to enforce anything down there on the beach trail. Because the park rangers aren't going to do it. They don't have site authority anyway, but they're not going to do it. It sounds like
Lifeguards aren't going to do it.
Well, I mean, honestly, nobody wants the lifeguards looking back at the beach trail and chasing down people on bikes. They want the lifeguards looking. I mean, they had enough to do.
100% not. 100% not. Yep.
Are there any pinch points other than Mariposa? I say pinch points. Are there other areas other than Mariposa Bridge that we would like to add to the list of places we should walk?
Well, there's maybe I missed what you said there, Steve, but from DeHay south to the pier is real tight. It's a long stretch of probably 150 yards or so, and it's 5 feet wide in many places. That's a real tight stretch. We tried to make it bigger when we designed it, but the city wouldn't give us any more room into the parking lot, and we couldn't move any closer to the railroad tracks because we can only move 15 feet in. So that was all we had.
So what's left of the beach trail to ride? No, I'm not being facetious. I'm just like, why would you get on the beach trail in North Beach if you got to start walking?
I can only tell you, Steve, that when we tried to design this thing, bikes weren't part of it. Okay, bikes are now part of it, and we have pinch points that weren't designed for bikes, and that's one of them. It just is. So we're trying to. It's the old round. Square peg, round hole, you pick them. And we're trying to make it work. And I understand it may be difficult the way it was designed. You're supposed to walk your bike if you get there. Now, if we're trying to get people to get on their bikes and ride, we have to be cognizant that we either have to have a sign at DeHay that says yield to pedestrians, because if there's nobody on it, quite frankly, and you're a biker and there's nobody on that trail, you're looking straight down it, ride it. But if there's somebody there, you've got to use your brain. And when you get close to them, you might want to get off and walk around them and then ride again. So you don't jostle up or clip them.
So you're talking about a maximum speed limit when people are present?
Pardon me?
A maximum speed limit when people are present?
Well, I think it's 6 miles an hour. I'd do the whole darn thing. This is not a transportation corridor. I know people have tried to create a transportation corridor out of it, but it's really a recreational corridor. People are supposed to be walking on it, jogging on it. That's what it was for. Now we're trying to create this thing for the bikes, and I understand that, but you just can't let them go. And you too, have fun.
Yeah, to the point.
Tight.
Yeah, to the point that's been made a couple of times prior. If somebody's needing to get from North Beach to Calafia, they can, and they need to get there quickly. They can take the city streets.
Charlie, and even 5 miles an hour on a beach trail is a good steady run. So that you're going to get there faster than walking. So what I'm hearing people talking about is reducing the speed limit, putting a requirement in the ordinance to yield to pedestrians, and then maybe adding at least Mariposa Bridge, and then in John's world, a bigger chunk of the trail. But John, do you still care about the DeHay south if the speed limit's down to like 5 or 6?
We can try a lot of different things, and if it's not working, then we can switch, we can change them. But if worst case on that, you put a sign at both ends and say, yield, bicycles have to yield, just so they know that they're second on the list as they go down that area. You can ride a bicycle past somebody there. If everybody's paying attention, you're coming up behind somebody. You don't pass them at 6 miles an hour if they don't know you're there. You could scare the heck out of them. I don't have a solution for that. I know that walking it is a solution, but if you want to roll the dice on it, then at least I would put up something that's caution.
So let me take a crack at a motion, and that's probably the best way to flesh out where people are on this. So I will make a motion that we amend section 12.32.130 in the following particulars. In sub A, we add into the litany of vehicles specific reference to e-bikes, which is not in there. And then in subsection B, I would add in Mariposa Bridge to the list of bridges that you have to walk on. I would reduce the speed limit from 10 miles per hour to 5. And then I would add a provision in there that cyclists must yield to pedestrians.
I missed that last part.
That cyclists must yield to pedestrians. So the motion is 4 parts. It's 1, include e-bikes specifically by name in this ordinance. Number 2, add Mariposa Bridge to the list of bridges that you have to walk. A specific sentence requiring cyclists to yield to pedestrians, and then reducing the speed limit from 10 to 5. That would be my motion.
So Steve, I like all of that. If I'm reading section A, it literally says any bicycle. I'm not sure why we would have to specifically call out e-bike. It's not a deal breaker to me, but it literally says any bicycle. And as Sam reminded us, right now the state assembly said e-bikes should be treated like bicycles. So other than that, I support what you're talking about there.
Well, the only reason I said that is because of this open question about whether an e-bike is a motorized vehicle or a bicycle under the city ordinance. And if we're eventually going to define it, that's why we throw e-bike in here now.
Fair enough.
But I don't feel strongly about it. So is there a second on my motion?
Can I throw another discussion point, or do we have to have the second before we discuss?
Well, I don't have a second, so the motion wouldn't be debated.
I'll second it.
Okay.
I'll second.
So John Mandrick has given us the second so we can have the debate. So Bernie, go.
Okay. I'm not trying to be sarcastic here, but maybe you guys saw it. It was about 3 weeks ago. I was driving up El Camino Real, and I literally saw a biker gang, but they were on motorized unicycles, and they were going southbound past the old mortuary, the Secondly Art Supply, up the hill. And I don't use my phone while I'm driving, but I wanted to take a picture of it. But if we're adding in, we have bicycles and tricycles. If we're talking about it like that, do we need to say unicycles? I swear to you, there were 20 guys or 20 people on motorized unicycles zipping up El Camino Real southbound.
Do you think there'd be a unicycle on the beach trail though? Because we're not talking about city streets on this ordinance.
I know we're not. I'm just saying, I've also never seen anyone on a tricycle or a skateboard on the beach trail. It's hard to ride a skateboard on VG or roller skates. So I'm just saying, if we're going to get into the minutia of saying any bicycle, but that may or may not include an e-bike, it just dawned on me when we were having a conversation about that group of 20 some odd that were going up
Can
El Camino.
I ask a question, Bernie?
Yeah.
What you're saying is there's no need to include a definition or reference to e-bikes as part of this implementation of 130, right? You're saying we don't need to include that. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm asking the question. I'm not saying we don't. I'm just asking the question. I'm only clarifying because Sam made a point when we started. The state assembly said that motorized vehicles, we started with the parks. And Charlie said no motorized vehicles. And so wait a second, what does that mean? Because e-bikes are bicycles, according to state assembly, right? And so if that was what our accepted understanding of what an e-bike is it's a bicycle, then why do we need to edit section A since we already understand that e-bikes are bicycles?
Right, so unless.
That was my question.
Unless, as Samantha says, unless otherwise determined by local municipalities, which would be going against what the state assembly has defined them as, that we don't have to touch that. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. And then, but I am also hesitant I don't, as the Beaches, Parks and Recs Commission, don't want to get into the business of defining what our motorized vehicles are.
Okay.
I am interested in speaking in terms of what is permitted and safe and what the acceptable uses are of our beaches and parks and trails. But I don't want to get into saying that this vehicle is a motorized vehicle, this one isn't. If right now, as it's stated, an e-bike should be treated like a bicycle, and if that's the accepted definition from the top down for our state, which we fall under, then section A is good. And then I saw bicycle, then tricycle, which was funny. I just hadn't seen the word tricycle in a while, which took my mind to the unicycle gang that I saw and thought that seems more appropriate. If we're going to have bicycle and tricycle, then we should have unicycle in there. But an e-bike is a bicycle. The definition that we've been told.
Okay, so Bernie, if I may, to your point, one, I'm happy to amend the motion to include unicycle. No problem with that. Two, as it references my interest in specifying e-bikes, as I stated, the city has the power to define an e-bike as a motorized vehicle. We have statutes covering motorized. We have ordinances covering motorized vehicles, not covering motorized vehicles. City council asked us to look at e-bikes on the beach trail. If we send back a proposal on the ordinance and don't even include verbiage of e-bike, basically what we have said to city council is we just think of them all as one and the same. And so that's one of the reasons that I'm sticking that word in there, because then it makes it clear, yes, we're thinking about everything. We're thinking about what you asked us to do. And we want to make it clear that e-bikes and bikes and tricycles and unicycles and roller skates and inline, we don't have roller blades here.
Your point is well taken. Your point is well taken for sure.
We need something like real stuff.
I feel like at least you and I may have heard some others, but at least you and I said that we don't necessarily see a distinguishable difference between bikes and e-bikes. I know that's how I feel about this. And I think that when Sam delivers her staff report, in the same way that she can make note that with the inland trails, we didn't just ignore it, we just recommended no action. I think in the same way, Sam could say, we're recognizing the way that the state assembly defines e-bikes as bicycles, and so this is for bicycles as a whole on the beach trail. And that's what I'm comfortable with because, well, I don't need to say it again, but that's what I'm comfortable with. Bicycles as a whole.
Okay, so you would be comfortable with my motion if I withdrew the first portion to amend section A.
Steve, can you also address increased signage along the trail as part of your motion, which is one of the recommendations of Samantha's group?
Yeah, well, I think the yield to pedestrian, that's going to have to be a sign anyway. I don't know how the department wants to do it. Samantha?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the goal here is to take final recommendations back to council. So if out of all of this, the commission decides that they would like, or they would recommend increasing signage to inform the public of where bikes are not allowed or where walking is required, that can certainly be written into the final recommendation. It doesn't necessarily need to be addressed in the code or this muni section by any means, but certainly the commission could recommend that. I do also want to say, as something to throw out there, if there's concern about the definition of a bicycle, And I do think it's really important as we look through policies and codes that we think about future all of us. Maybe 15 years from now, we are not all sitting in these chairs, and the question comes up, well, why, what are e-bikes included in bicycles? I don't know. That could come up. You could look to add a definition section within this code. To your point, Chair Striger, it is not defined right now. Many sections within our code do have a definition section that does not exist right now. It can be added if the commission wants to give that in-depth consideration as well. But it technically is included in this assembly statements. So
Yeah, so I don't give it as much weight as some other people do, because every city can do their own.
Yeah, Steve, I'm gonna have to go in just a minute because my back's killing me. Can I call for a vote now and see if we can just expedite this, or I'm gonna have to leave anyway?
Well, I'll tell you what. Well, my motion is on the floor and it's been seconded by you.
Right.
Does anybody else have any discussion that they need to take on this motion? Okay, so we're gonna respectfully to Bernie, I'm gonna keep my section A addition to e-bike, just in part because of Samantha's comment. So again, my motion is add reference specifically to e-bike in A, add Mariposa Bridge to section B, add a requirement that cyclists yield to pedestrians and that the department put up signage to that effect. Clarifying and adding that to the motion, and then the 5 miles per hour. So that's the motion. John, I still have your second on that?
Yes, please.
Okay. So, John Dory, you're on mute.
You're muted.
Okay, here I am. You were cutting out on me. Was there I wasn't sure if you addressed the DHA issue in your motion or a caution or yield. What did you do? Did you do anything with that?
I wasn't including the DHA portion in my motion. I was just doing the yield and the 5 miles an hour. And to me, that covers the DHA issue.
Okay, I didn't hear it all. So thank you.
Okay. So with that on motion, please raise your hand indicating affirmance, meaning you agree with the motion. We'll see where we're at. Okay, I've got John Banderick, Richard, myself, John Dory, Charlie Smith. So that's 5. So Bernie, you're a no?
Yep.
Okay, so that is a 5-1. That matter passes. John, if you have to go, you can go, I guess.
I have to go. I'm dying here. Thank you.
Thanks for being here, John.
Feel better. Okay, so we'll see what City Council says on that. Might be back with us before we know it.
Steve, let me ask you a question on that, if you don't mind. I know it's already passed, but the addition of the signage is what threw me off. Sam, the addition of signs, would that come back before us? I just have this fear that this beach trail, almost every single letter that was read to us talked about how beautiful it is, and we walked to take in the views, and just worry that it's going to be littered with billboards the whole way through. Is the placement of the signage or the addition of the signage going to be something that comes back before the commission here?
it can be, but I will share with you that if there's one thing that's ingrained in me is that this town is sensitive to signage. Our council is sensitive to signage. I hear that loud and clear. So I by no means want to provide sign blight. We will be tasteful and considerate by every step.
Thank you.
And
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And to be very clear, we are asking that signage designs and the number of them, I guess, come to us, that we agendize that before they go live.
Okay, sure. Yeah, you bet.
Let City Council know that we wish to micromanage that part.
Micromanage away.
Okay. Maybe even set up a subcommittee.
You bet.
No.
Okay. New business. We have none. This was a specially set meeting to some extent. Public input. Miley warned me we have a few comments.
I have two.
Okay.
The first is from Alicia. Our city does an awesome job of providing public tennis courts and making them available to use in the evening. One thing my family and I have noticed recently is that since we like to play a little later in the evening, after dinner usually, but the lights on the court seem to be shutting down at 8 p.m. now instead of 10 p.m. as they did prior to COVID. There's no logical reason that would explain the decision to close courts earlier as it relates to COVID, and I respectfully request that you let the lights on the courts remain on until 10 p.m. again, or at least 9 p.m. Thank you for your time. And the next comment is from Clint Mathis. I wanted to express interest in building a community activity area on the Vista Hermosa Sports Park property next to the soccer fields. Does the city have any interest in working with a vendor on this project as well as other open concessions in San Clemente? Will there be an RFP process, and if so, how soon?
All right, thank you, Riley. Okay, so that closes public input. Communications, Samantha, anything?
I have nothing at this point. Thank you.
Okay. The Ad Hoc Water Quality Committee. John, you still doing that?
I've got nothing.
Okay.
Is that something we should take off the agenda for future meetings?
Well, they're still supposed to come back, and if they went by me, I missed it. But I think I'd leave it on there for another meeting.
Okay.
We'll keep it on another round or two. It helps to fill out the agenda. You know, it's getting kind of thin here. Okay, well, we have no subcommittees. We gotta start, doing stuff. Okay, friends, John.
The only thing there is that we have a new steering committee and a new president. I termed out at 3 years. Bill Hart is now our new president, and we are starting our new year and are hopeful that we can have some money makers this year and create some income so we can give it back to the city. And that'll all be worked out in the next 30 to 60 days.
Okay, Courtney's. John has left us early, and I suspect he did not appoint anyone to give his report. That would probably be safe for Pure Pride. So with that, we are adjourned to Tuesday, February 9th, 2021 at 6 p.m. via Zoom. And Samantha will let me know in advance if we have nothing to do. Do you envision us having an agenda? Because it's only 4 weeks away.
We have plenty to do.
All right.
Got to check off our work plan.
Oh, that thing? Oh, we're actually
something on that.
E-bikes is one down, you guys.
Okay, one down. All right.